Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you are watching NewX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israel's government has ratified a ceasefire deal with Hamas, paving the way to halt fighting in Gaza within 24 hours and free Israeli hostages within 72 hours. The agreement, backed by U.S. President Donald Trump's initiative, includes a phased troop withdrawal from Gaza as Israelis gathered at Hostage Square in anticipation of the deal's implementation. The United States will deploy 200 troops to support and monitor the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, according to media reports. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that Turkey will join a task force to oversee the agreement signed in Egypt, while Israel has confirmed that prominent Palestinian prisoner Marwan Barghouti will not be part of the prisoner release deal. Russia has launched missile and drone attack on Kyiv today, plunging the Ukrainian capital into darkness, damaging critical infrastructure and wounding at least 9 people, according to Ukrainian officials. As strikes have also killed a 7-year-old child in Zaporizhia and forced evacuations in the Donbas region. Magnitude 7.5 earthquake has hit southern Philippines, triggering tsunami warnings in Philippines and Indonesia. For now, according to local seismology agency, evacuation orders have been issued for the residents, while no comments have been made about the exact damage of this earthquake. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned that air traffic controllers who repeatedly failed to report to work during the government shutdown could be fired. More than 3,300 flights were delayed on Thursday as the disruptions continued, prompting senators to urge airlines to issue refunds as government shutdown enters its 9th day. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has praised friendly and cooperative ties with China as he hosted Chinese Premier Li Qiang and other foreign dignitaries for the 80th anniversary of the Workers' Party. The celebrations, attended by Russia's Dmitry Medvedev, come as Pyongyang prepares a massive military parade. Peru's Congress has approved impeachment proceedings against President Dina Boluarte after lawmakers filed 4 motions seeking her removal. The move comes amid growing public discontent and political turmoil in the country. Myanmar's junta has announced that Malaysia will send observation teams to monitor its delayed election, set to begin on December 28th. The move comes as the military led by Min Aung Hlaing faces civil war and international criticism that the poll is a bid to legitimate continued military rule. Now for this hour, we start with the Middle East. The Israeli government has approved a deal to release all hostages held in Gaza, both living and deceased. The decision marking a historic moment in the 2-year conflict between Israel and Hamas. Under the deal, the first phase will see the hostages released within 72 hours. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar has stated that this deal could bring an end to the war in Gaza. Let's listen into what he has said in a recent interview.
If Hamas carries out its part of the agreement, is this the end of the war?
Well, it's the implementation of the first phase. We don't have any intention to renew the war, but parts of the commitments is, for example, the disarmament of Hamas, that they will lay down their arms and so on.
And that will be phase 2.
We will first have a ceasefire. Immediately after the decision will be approved by the government, there will be a ceasefire. And then the commitment within 72 hours of Hamas to release all the hostages. I believe that
Meanwhile, the U.S. President Donald Trump has said that no one will be forced to leave Gaza under the peace plan. He has also stated the second phase will focus on disarmament, with Israel insisting that Hamas must surrender its weapons. The hostages held by Hamas are expected to be released on Monday or Tuesday. Here's what he has said.
We are getting the hostages back on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and that'll be a day of joy. I'm going to try and make a trip over. We're going to try and get over there, and we're working on the timing, the exact timing. We're going to go to Egypt, where we'll have a signing, an additional signing. We've already had a signing representing me, but we're going to have an official signing.
When does it begin?
I'm not going to talk about that because you sort of know what phase 2 is, but there will be disarming, there will be pullbacks, there will be a lot of things that are happening. You know, I gave you a whole list of 22 different things that will happen.
Now, the deal was signed by all parties in Egypt, and the ceasefire is expected to take effect within 24 hours. President Trump has confirmed he will attend a signing ceremony in Egypt, furthering his involvement in the peace process. Let's listen in.
We are getting the hostages back on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and that'll be a day of joy. I'm going to try and make a trip over. We're going to try and get over there, and we're working on the timing, the exact timing. We're going to go to Egypt, where we'll have a signing, an additional signing. We've already had a signing representing me, but we're going to have an official signing.
The agreement includes a plan to pull back Israeli forces, with U.S. military officials set to oversee the ceasefire's implementation. The final draft of the agreement was signed by all parties, but challenges remain, particularly concerning the disarmament of Hamas and the future political structure of Gaza. Let's listen in to what Shosh Bedrosian, Israeli government spokeswoman, has said.
Now, the final draft of phase 1 was signed this morning in Egypt by all parties to release all of the hostages. And the IDF will then redeploy to that yellow line we mentioned, which will lead to the military controlling and holding about 53% of the Gaza Strip. Now, phase 1 stands very clear. All of our hostages, the living and deceased, will be released 72 hours later, which will bring us to Monday.
U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were present in Jerusalem, playing a pivotal role in securing the deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has thanked the U.S. for securing this peace deal, marking a breakthrough in the Israel-Hamas war. Let's listen in.
Momentous development in the last 2 years. We fought during these 2 years to achieve our war aims. And a central one of these war aims is to return the hostages, all of the hostages, the living and the dead. And we're about to achieve that goal. We couldn't have achieved it without the extraordinary help of President Trump and his team, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. They worked tirelessly with Ron and his team, our team. That and the courage of our soldiers who entered Gaza, and the combined military and diplomatic pressure that isolated Hamas, I think, is part.
Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Dr. Albayt Nintujam. He's a Deputy Director and Assistant Professor, Symbiosis of School of International Studies, joins us live from Pune. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Professor, now, so far, what do we know? What are the main terms and conditions that have been agreed for this phase 1 of this deal?
Yeah, thank you once again for having me on the show. I think as we all have discussed and been hearing since last night, the first phase of this agreement would largely do with the exchange of hostage and prisoner swappings between the two sides. That remains one of the most sticking points ever since the conflict has begun. That has led to the death of thousands of Israelis and at the same time thousands of the Gazans on the other side. And we have seen the captives and the Israeli citizens being held as captives, hostages. So this would be very important, marker of the first phase of the agreement that the Israeli government has approved last night in India and local time in Israel. So if this gets through, this probably would lead to few more breakthroughs and developments with regard to this long-standing conflict between the two sides. So the exchange of prisoners and the hostages in the next 72 hours, as per the agreement, that would remain one of the most important trajectory of the development.
And Professor, if you can also tell us what are the challenges that's remaining between this future of this Hamas and Gaza's peace deal?
Yeah. So first, of course, one of the most important challenges was the dynamic that you just mentioned. That is the that I also had explained, the exchange of prisoners and the hostages, the swapping mechanism that they have agreed to. The second one would be disarmament of Hamas inside Gaza Strip, how that is going to pan out or carry forward in the next phase of the plan remains to be seen. Again, we also have talked about the limited withdrawal of Israel from Gaza Strip. That will again, will take good amount of effort, political, diplomatic effort from both the sides. Whether Israelis will be willing to withdraw fully from Gaza Strip, or it's going to be that they will do it in batch by batch wise. So the next sticking point, or the problem rather, would be the disarmament of Hamas, complete disarmament, or the withdrawal of Israel from the Strip.
And lastly, Professor, now we know that many other countries, including US, Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, these countries were involved. How do you think these countries will be involved moving forward?
Yeah, this is again a very important, we all have seen again the reinforcement of the importance of US in the Middle Eastern politics. And they have been one of the major players, if you look at the history of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and some of the important peace deals or accords have been signed under the aegis of the United States. 1993 Oslo Accord being one of the most important agreement. But you also have the involvement of regional players like Jordan, Qatar, of course, a very important country, and Egypt, again, another very important country that Israel signed its peace deal in 1979. So the involvement of these countries also reflect the continuing importance that they have played in trying to bring some sort of a stability in the region, particularly by giving a platform to Israel and some of the adversaries in the region. And in this case, we have Hamas. It's a very important development. And at the same time, it's a very critical involvement of these regional players that have their own interests, of course, and also the regional interests to ebb the tensions that have been growing in the region since October 2023. So their involvement is very, very significant.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ning Tujam, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. In Cairo, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is urging Israel to immediately de-escalate, warning that continued strikes in Gaza risk derailing a long-awaited ceasefire agreement. Sisi is also pressing for swift action, saying hostilities should stop even before the formal signing of the deal. Further, he has also renewed his invitation to U.S. President Donald Trump to attend a signing ceremony in Egypt, praising American, Qatari, and Turkish mediation efforts and calling the deal a vital step towards ending the war. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has warned that Israel's expanding settlements in the West Bank pose an existential threat to future Palestinian state, calling them a breach of international law. Speaking at a conference on Gaza's future, Macron also stressed the importance of Palestinian ownership in any post-war governance structure. Let's listen in.
Tous aujourd'hui, autour de cette table, nous sommes prêts à contribuer à soutenir le plan de paix américain. Il a besoin de nos retours honnêtes, de nos contributions concrètes dans chacune de ces dimensions: la gouvernance, la sécurité, l'aide humanitaire et la reconstruction. D'abord, l'établissement d'une gouvernance temporaire pour Gaza. Vous y avez beaucoup travaillé ces 2 dernières années. Sur ce point, nous ne devons pas perdre de vue la nécessité d'une appropriation palestinienne qui constitue la base de l'horizon politique rappelé par notre président Trump, autodétermination et création.
Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthi rebels have said that they will remain vigilant until the ceasefire is fully enforced, continuing to monitor the situation and threatening further action if the truce falters. In Dushanbe, Russian President Vladimir Putin has voiced support for President Trump's Gaza peace plan. Let's listen in.
Мы видим, что сейчас происходит, вот достигнуто по информации из средств, из СМИ, окончательные решения. Мы очень надеемся на то, что эти инициативы президента США будут на самом деле на практике реализованы. Подчеркну, Россия всегда исходила и исходит из того, что решить проблемы ближневосточного региона можно лишь политико-дипломатическими средствами. И мы, естественно, готовы поддержать любые мирные усилия, направленные на то, чтобы остановить кровопролитие и принести спокойствие в этот регион.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke with President Trump, calling the Gaza ceasefire a historic step towards peace. He also spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, reaffirming India's support for the US-led initiative to end this conflict. Now for this discussion, we go back to Dr. Alvitening Tujum. He's a Deputy Director and Assistant Professor at Symbiosis School of International Studies. Joins us live from Pune. Thank you very much, Dr. Professor, for staying with us. Now we have seen all the leaders across the world and their reactions pouring in. But while Israel and Gaza, they have signed a deal, the shelling still continues in Gaza. Why do you think Israel is still continuing to bomb Gaza, although they know that it risks their hostages' lives, and they know that they are coming back? So why do you think they're still continuing?
I didn't see this information. I don't have the latest information, but little that I saw early this morning was the efforts of the presence of IDF going back to other side of the territory. There was a little bit of a bombing until last evening. That was the time when the cabinet meeting was going on in Jerusalem. With regard to this continuing bombardment, I don't have any information in that regard. But I was aware, of course, of the bombing that was covered by some of the major news channels, including CNN and BBC, last evening about the bombardment inside the Gaza Strip, and they have come out with a statement saying that this is a part of their activity before the ceasefire came into effect. So I will not be able to comment much on that.
Thank you, Professor. However, and while other reactions poured in, also yesterday we covered one that was UNRWA's reaction. They've hailed the ceasefire as a huge relief, and then they have said that there are plans to restore essential infrastructure. Do you think that these efforts will lead to long-term stability for the aid access, or do you think that these could be temporary solution amidst a broader unresolved conflict for the aid to pass to Gazans safely?
Yeah, if we look at the plan, I think it's too early to predict any longevity or absolute effectiveness of this peace plan. But it is very important that at least some sort of an agreement has been reached between the two sides. And one of the most, again, apart from the prisoner hostage swapping mechanism that they have agreed upon, there is also a fair deal of requirement to improve the humanitarian situation inside Gaza Strip. And as a result of this ceasefire, there will be a lot more movements, I believe, of aid going into Gaza Strip to cater to some of the very, very severe problems pertaining to health and the food crisis or any other form of crisis which we are seeing inside the Gaza Strip. So for now, it is a very important breakthrough that would allow a good amount of movement of the aid carriers inside the Strip. That in itself would be a big takeaway from this agreement. But how, again, the implementation of this deal in the first phase is very, very important. So if this gets through, then they'll move on to the second phase and the third phase as per the planning. So again, I mentioned this position in my earlier discussion with your news channel also, that it is too hard to predict what's going to happen in Middle East, particularly with this kind of development that we have been seeing for the last 2 years. But it now depends on Israel and Hamas, with a little bit of a help that they are getting from US and some of the regional players, to ensure that there is a streamlined process of meeting this peace plan, and also how they start rebuilding the strip from the damage that has been caused by this conflict for the last 2 years.
Yes, indeed. And we will be eyeing and updating you on all of this updates. Thank you very much, Dr. Alwhite, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout this topic. Now we move on. A major Russian attack on central Kyiv has triggered a fire in a high-rise apartment building and targeted energy sites, cutting powers to parts of the capital. Kyiv Mayor Vital Klitschko has said that 9 people have been injured, with 5 of them taken to hospital. Has also added that power cuts and disruption to the water supply have hit districts on the east bank of the Dnipro River that runs through the city. The Russian strikes has also killed a 7-year-old child in the southeast Ukraine. Meanwhile, the energy minister Svetlana Grinchko has said that Russian forces have hit energy sites. She further stated that energy experts are taking necessary measures to minimize negative consequences. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump has said that the United States and NATO allies are stepping up the pressure to end the war in Ukraine after his outreach to Russian President Vladimir Putin failed to materialize any ceasefire. Let's listen into what President Trump has said.
We are stepping up the pressure. We're stepping it up together. We're all stepping it up. NATO's been great.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us again. Good to see you. Ross, now from your analysis, how do you see Russia and US's relationship?
At the moment, obviously, President Trump has been focused on mediating between Hamas and Israel, but it's certainly very possible that he will turn his attention back to the war in Russia and Ukraine. And he might very well repeat some of the criticisms that's become more frequent when he speaks about this issue, specifically criticisms about President Putin. And that was a bit of a change from what President Trump used to say earlier this year after he returned to office. That being said, I think President Trump is still eager to bring the two sides together in a deal that would basically freeze the front line where it is now. There was the remark that Trump made about Russia not being able to win the war and the advantage is with Ukraine, and that very well might be possible. But as I previously said here on NewsX, I don't think President Trump is giving Ukraine a green light to launch a major counteroffensive. So we're kind of still where we are, I think, from around the time that Putin met with President Trump in Alaska, which is President Trump wants the two sides to quickly reach an agreement that would basically freeze the front line where it is.
And now you've also mentioned that President Trump is focused on mediating between Gaza and Hamas and Israel. So since this outcome between Hamas and Israel was also reached because the world stood up, a lot of people around the globe stood up asking for a negotiation or asking for pause in the halting in this situation in Gaza. Do you think if the world stands up united again for this Ukraine and Russia, do you think that there is possibility that ceasefire could be reached between them?
That's an interesting question. I actually would take the view that it's President Trump himself and his own pressure on Netanyahu that may have prompted some movement on the Israeli side. Clearly, Israel and Netanyahu throughout the war have been fairly resistant to international criticism and international pressure. And also, frankly, Israel has largely achieved its military goals, not entirely. They didn't recover all the hostages on their own and had to reach this ceasefire agreement in order to do so, but they've largely militarily defeated Hamas. So it could be simply that the timing was right for Israel to reach this deal as well. Now, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, the situation is certainly distinguished. European countries have been very united, with some exceptions, but for the most part, and especially the major countries like France, Germany, and the UK, they've been very united in their support for Ukraine. They've been very united in continuing to impose additional rounds of sanctions on Russia. And on the other side, Russia has continued the war. It has its support economically and politically from certain countries, most notably China, and to a lesser extent, certainly economically from India. So the view from around the world doesn't seem to have an effect on how the two countries, Ukraine and Russia, are approaching the war or approaching ceasefire talks. Now, of course, both countries have significant incentives to stop the war. The economic cost, the cost in human lives, is tremendous. Russia wants some of the international sanctions removed as well. So both sides, again, they also have incentive to reach an agreement. But similar to Israel and Hamas, the main player here is not going to be Europe or Asia or the Middle East. It's going to be the United States.
Thank you, Ross, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on to North America. A federal judge has temporarily halted President Donald Trump's deployment of the Texas National Guard to Chicago, rejecting claims of a danger of rebellion that would justify the move. The restraining order issued by District Judge April Perry will last about 2 weeks as legal challenges continue. Let's listen into what Attorney General Kwame Raoul has said.
Judge Perry did a very careful job of weighing the evidence, weighing the credibility of the evidence and those declarations that served as the testimony to be considered as to whether or not the President of the United States could and should federalize and deploy the National Guard into our great city and our great state. And I think after doing so, she made the correct decision to enter a temporary restraining order.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has announced plans to expand his federal law and order campaign already underway to Memphis, to Chicago, and other cities. Let's listen in.
And we're restoring law and order in our country. We're restoring it here, but we're restoring it right now. We're in Memphis. We're going to Chicago. We're going to other cities. Many governors are asking us to, including Democrats are trying to ask. I don't know what the big problem is. If I were a Democrat governor, I'd be saying, whatever you can do to get crime down, I'll take anybody. We've launched a historic campaign to take back our nation from the gangs and the street criminals, violent repeat offenders, illegal alien lawbreakers, domestic extremists, and savage.
However, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker strongly criticized the deployment, calling it an overreach of presidential power that militarizes urban areas. Protests against the National Guard's presence and federal immigration policies continue in Chicago, highlighting the growing tension between the Trump administration and local officials. Now for this discussion, we go back to Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you, Ross, for staying with us. Now this is ongoing. It started from LA and now it's in Chicago, Illinois. So what are the legal challenges surrounding President Trump's deployment of this Texas National Guard to Chicago?
there's different sections of federal law that would allow, that in theory would allow the President of the United States to deploy National Guard troops domestically. Now, the starting point and what typically gets a lot of attention is that there is a law that generally prohibits the use of the United States military for policing duties within the United States. However, again, there are also sections of federal law that do, in theory, allow the president to deploy the National Guard in situations such as rebellion or other types of domestic unrest. So much of the debate when these cases get into courts, as they have recently, is whether or not the situation on the ground has reached the level as defined under the federal laws that would allow the president to do this. So again, it must be emphasized because there is so much confusion about this. In theory, the president has the right to do this. It's simply a matter of whether or not the facts on the ground reach the level as required by applicable federal law for the president to actually do this. And that's why the other side, whether it's that the city or the state governments are going into court, and they're basically saying, yeah, we have crime, we're not denying that, but the situation on the ground does not rise to the level of unrest or rebellion that would allow the president to take this action. So that's basically what they're debating in the courts. And the judges are coming down differently. It depends whether the judge is a conservative or a progressive. And that's just the reality in the United States. You know, we like to think about judges as being apolitical, but judges have political background. And again, conservative judges will rule in favor of the administration, and progressive or liberal judges will rule against it.
And Ross, is this really necessary from what you know to protect these cities according to President Trump? And we know that there are protests against the ICE commanders and also the National Guard's presence. But will this, just deploying these forces, will this solve problem in long term?
I think the end of your question is really the key. Does it solve a problem, in the long term? Now, the immediate deployment of additional law enforcement or security personnel, that should help reduce crime. Certainly if there are more men and women, possibly with weapons, standing around on street corners, then yeah, it's going to reduce the incidence of street crime where these personnel are deployed. But these deployments are typically for a limited duration, and does it really remedy a problem over the long term? The answer to that is probably no. And that's one of the reasons why the local governments or the state governments are again, they're not denying that there's crime. And they're typically saying that this is not the right solution. The right solution would be provide more money to our local law enforcement agencies, our local police agencies, so we could invest in more equipment, we could hire more personnel, and really work on solving crime over the long term. But part of this, again, is political as well. It makes for good politics for President Trump to say he's taking action, he's taking a demonstrable action to deal with street crime in America's largest cities. And for those who want more law enforcement and those who think that government is not doing enough for crime, then they're very impressed with President Trump's willingness to do this.
With that, I would like to thank Ross Feingold for joining us again and sharing your insight throughout the news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. A powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake has struck off of Mindanao, Philippines, triggering a tsunami warning with waves over 1 meter expected along the Pacific coast. Residents are urged to immediately evacuate to higher ground as waves may arrive between 9:43 and 11:43 a.m. PST and could last for hours. President Marcos has confirmed that all agencies and the military have been deployed for evacuation and rescue purposes, working around the clock to deliver aid. Damage has been reported in Davao Oriental, including to buildings and a church. Tsunami alerts were also issued for Indonesia's North, Sulawesi, and Papua regions. Now we move on to Europe. France's political turmoil deepens as President Emmanuel Macron is now hunting for his sixth prime minister in less than 2 years, after outgoing leader Sébastien Lecornu quit this week amid an escalating budget crisis. President Macron has promised to name a replacement within 48 hours, hoping to break a legislative deadlock that stalled efforts to pass a deficit-cutting budget and calm jittery markets. Lecornu has said that a deal is still possible, but insists the next prime minister must be politically neutral and not eye the 2027 presidency. Among those being considered are former socialist premier Bernard Cazeneuve, France's top auditor Pierre Moscovici, and veteran centrist Jean-Louis Borloo, who's already been in talks with key conservative figures. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.